top, and then the 80/20 is going to be towards the back so that that way it will hang completely straight. Now, and I want to make sure to walk my hand with the ruler so that that way I'm not holding my hand back here and the ruler is bobbing up and down and the opportunity to go up. Okay, so now I have this beautiful quilt of Sylvia Rhine's loaded, and I am using a double bat. I'm actually using two 80/20s. Again, we want to remember that the sweater balls are facing up so that we don't get pilling coming out the back of the quilt on the batting. The next thing I'm going to do is I have locked my stitches. I've got my quilt stretched out nice and straight, and I have my vertical channel lock on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply baste the inner edge, and I like to stay in about 1/8 of an inch just inside the edge where the binding's going to cover to keep this quilt nice and square. I have my stitch length set at 6 stitches per inch. I'm going to go up, and let me see, now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to switch to my horizontal rather than my vertical. Okay, so now my horizontal is locked in. I'm going to go across the top. And again, I'm staying right within that 1/8 of an inch so that that way when the binding goes on, it's going to cover that basting, but it's going to make that binding so much easier to do. That right in there, take my time, and again, sometimes you're going to get fullness, and when you do get fullness, which is probably going to be about 60% of the time just because of the nature of a quilt, you're going to want to kind of push down on this to kind of distribute that fullness nice and even. Now, I don't have my ruler base on yet. If you have a ruler base, you have to just go a little bit beyond the ruler base. So let's just go right across here. Okay, stop. I'm going to pull that up a little bit just because it's not up high enough. Loosen my clamp. Again, we're simply right in the basting process. So nothing real has been started. Okay, I'm going to go over here to the edge. Now we're going to lock that down. Now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to come in just a hair. I'm going to go ahead, take off my horizontal lock. Now I'm going to put on my vertical lock. And now I'm going to come down the other side. Now, actually, let me say something first. This quilt is like perfectly square almost. So I have no problem coming down with my stitch length on 6. But if there was any fullness in this border whatsoever, and actually on 99.9% of other quilts, I would have come down to the bottom of my throat space and I simply would have basted up. Because that's going to make sure that I'm not pushing fullness down, but there's really no fullness to push down in this particular quilt. And again, I've got my channel lock on, so this is going to keep it nice and square as I baste down the edge. Come up, lock my stitches, and now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to change, and what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and ditch between the body and border. And what I'm going to do, and I know we talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to go over any of the changes that I made in my head. I am going to go ahead and I'm going to use some gold metallic in this border. We are going to locate the center, and I'm going to do chevron from the corner in at 45 degrees from both sides in. And then I'm also going to go ahead and pinstripe those chevrons. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and ditch between. And since I'm using the gold metallic on the outside, what I kind of want is the accent in the ditch work. So I'm going to do a nice thick ditch line in here in the gold metallic rather than invisible. Okay, so I'm going to start marking this, and I always like to pre-mark my chevron, so I located the center, obviously, and what I did is I measured from the inside body here to the other inside body over here, and then I marked it in half, which was 19 inches. And so now I'm going to go over here to the corner, and I'm going to line up my 45 degree. I'm going to go ahead, give myself, let me move that machine out of the way a little bit, give myself my perfect 45 degree. And now I've decided that what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let me see. I think what I'm going to do, let me measure my sash. My sash is 1 inch here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead for my chevrons, and I'm going to double that. So I'm going to go to 2-inch and do 2-inch chevrons with beadboarding or pinstriping right in there. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to grab some red tape. We'll put that on the bottom to make it easier to mark. Get a piece of the red tape, and I want to make sure to put that on the back of the ruler. This is one of the Composer Series rulers, which has all the wonderful 45 degree marks. We want to make sure to be able to read Composer Series right across the top here, because we know then that the etching's on the back. We don't want to flip it upside down or we'll see double lines. So as I measure this, I'm going to go down 2 inches, 2 inches, locate that. I'm going to put my little piece of red tape right across that line. And now, as I move my way across, I don't have to count 8 quarters to get my perfect measurements. So I'm going to take this line is going to stay on there. I'm going to slide that right across. I'm going to go right to my miter line, check my 45 degree, and now I'm going to go ahead and mark my first chevron, go again, and I check 2 things. I check my line here, but I also check this here. I want to make sure that I'm not getting any lean, because we don't want our chevron lines to start leaning. Work my way all the way to the middle from both sides. Make sure to check my 45 degree line, keep that on there, because that's the line I'm the most concerned about. Oh. Now my 1/4 inch, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to mark after I get my chevrons marked. And yes, I will go ahead and pre-mark those. I could just use my ruler foot, which should be a perfect 1/4 inch, but actually, I think I like to go ahead sometimes and just simply make the mark. Then I don't have to think about it as I'm quilting through. Okay, so I just ended up right here. Here is my center line, right there. So I'm about 1 inch short. So now I have a decision to make. I can go ahead and stylize it a little bit by doing the 3/4 inches and going to the center, or I could go ahead and go to the 2 inches and simply do a little guy right there. So that way when I meet at the other end, the other one's going to meet there, and it's going to be perfect 2 inches all the way across. So I am going to go ahead and do it that way rather than stylize it and make the middle a little bit different. And remember, once we get this quilted, the best thing to do if you're going to walk away from your machine for a few days is to take a good picture of the top here, what you've done on this border, so that, especially the center part, so that when you get down to the bottom, you won't have forgotten. How did I handle the center? So now I'm going to flip this around. I'm going to go to my 1/4 inch. I'm going to line it up, get my miter in place, so my corner, and now I'm going to work my way in, same way that we did from the other side in. Okay, and if we did it right, we have the same distance from here to the center, and it looks right. So I'm going to line that up, go to my 2 inches, make sure that's lined up. And again, what I'm going to do, if I'm off a little bit, I'm always going to fudge to the center. So now I am off 1/8 of an inch, but I have a little bit thicker chalk, so that could be it. So I'm going to just move over about 1/8 of an inch so that that way my center is what's clearly going to be lined up. So this is going to be perfect in the center. Okay, because remember, we are going to go ahead now, go back, and we're going to put in our 1/4 inch line there. And I've changed my mind. I'm going to do the 1/4 inch, but I'm going to just use my ruler foot. And we are going to use metallic thread. Before I get started on that part though, let me go ahead and work my way down. Line that up. Again, I've got my 45-degree lined up here. So I'm going to go ahead, go down there like that, line that up, and I'm just going to go down within my throat space so that I know how far I can go down. Okay, so there we go. There's the bottom of our throat space. I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to ditch between the two. Because of how square this quilt is, I didn't have to worry about making sure that these marks are going to match if there was any fullness if I marked before I did my ditch. Because normally I would have gone ahead and ditched this first and then put my marks in. But because this quilt is so square, I know now that when I go ahead and do my ditch work in this a little bit thicker, it's going to be perfectly square and these lines are still going to be perfect. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm going ahead and I am ditching between the border and that thin sashing, and I'm actually thickening my line just a little bit so that that way when I use my metallic to do my 45-degree, I'm not going to have a dead line here. It's actually going to look I think more natural, a little bit better based on the design that I've chose. And I'm right in that ditch. And I'm doing it 1, 2, 3, go forward about 4 or 5 inches. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to go forward. One, two, three, and I'm going to do that all the way over and around. Forward, back. And let me go back here for a second and say what I'm also going to do is I'm going to do that on this side as well because we're going to leave this sash unquilted on the inside. I want it to kind of puff up for that double batting. And then of course over there at the corner where that red corner is, when I go over here, I'm simply going to go ahead and just kind of ditch around that as well. And then that way the sash is going to pop forward and be really cool looking.